quickly share an entirely unrelated thing, but along with whatever mutilation?
I'll allow it.
Yeah, this will be the last tangent before we get to the subject.
This will be. So, context, I love all animals very much, and I dearly care for them.
I know.
Unless they're giant wasps. And so I might have decapitated a giant, like, inch-long wasp.
Giant hornet.
It is big as hell. And so their nervous systems are isolated. So if you decapitate it, then cut off his thorax.
Oh.
Each section will keep moving independently for a little bit, just impulsively. So you can trigger it to sting. And for some reason, which you can cut this out if this makes me look like a bad human, just now I decided to see what happens if I held up the body of it, which was still twitching, to its thorax, which was still stinging. And yeah, I stung its body with its thorax, and the body died.
Whoa.
It stopped moving and is actually officially, after half an hour, curled up and stopped.
I don't know if it died. Like, the stinging venom has like a paralysis agent.
Okay, yeah.
So you might have just paralyzed it, but you severed it, so it's already dead. So you might have just finished it off.
We just reminded it that it was dead.
Yes, I feel really bad about it, but that was
It was for science.
Yeah, it's for science. I feel like the Japanese scientists in World War II with like the Chinese prisoners of war.
Yeah, that's a really fucked up comparison, but yes.
I mean,
There's some knowledge that can only be discovered through fucked up means.
yeah.
You just compared yourself to notoriously the worst science experiments to ever happen.
Yeah. Like, seeing the body moving and like watching the stinger like move when you touch it, like, that shit was wild.
And then I just started killing his children in front of it for science.
I'm just saying.
If you do it for science, then that makes it okay, right?
Yeah, there's no moral black and white in science.
Yeah.
I shot a man in Reno for science.
Welcome to From the Machine. We have with us today two of the craziest extreme metal vocalists I've ever had the pleasure of hitting the record button on.
You're gonna make me blush, bro.
Topic at hand, extreme metal. Extreme metal is like vodka. Differences between vodkas are often subtle because the whole purpose of vodka is the pursuit of alcohol as pure intensity. The legal definition of vodka is any alcohol from any source that's distilled to 190 proof, then diluted in such a way that it has no distinct aroma or taste. So a lot of casual enjoyers of vodka think that all vodka tastes pretty much the same, which is as ridiculous as saying that all metal sounds the same. It's subtle because there's both an art and a science to the pursuit of intensity. This also makes it a safe mixer. You can mix vodka with about anything, just like there's metal fusions of every genre imaginable, because it's a universal intensifier. Extreme metal is defined by this pursuit of intensity. Something that's intensely fast, or intensely slow in the case of doom metal, intensely groovy, but above all, intensely loud.
This is true.
I mean, similar to how vodka is, it's not about the flavor. The taste of the vodka stays the same, or pretty similar. It's about how it makes you feel after you take it, and how you feel during taking it. You take a cheap vodka, it's gonna make you feel like you're taking tequila. Take a high-end vodka, it's gonna be smooth, but it still tastes like vodka.
And like vodka, some people who appreciate the subtleties of the vodka will appreciate the differences, but some people who might not appreciate just the like extreme aspect of the vodka will appreciate the kind of mixers that you mix in. Same thing with like metal. Some people who don't like the extreme, like crazy metal, appreciate the other genres of like alternative metal that have other flavors mixed in.
Julian, how you feel about metal and tequila or vodka?
Oh, I mean, I'm drinking tequila right now. But on top of that, as somebody is making vodka, you can also go two ways. You can go to channel the flavor, or you can go to channel the alcohol content. And based on that, you're going to either create a more intensity or create a more smoothness.
Are we making a designer vodka, or are we making some straight Everclear? Like, what we talking?
Some people pursue the high alcohol content, knowing it doesn't taste good for the thrill of the high alcohol content.
So what form of extreme metal are we considering Everclear, basically?
Grindcore.
Grindcore.
Grindcore. Absolutely
Grindcore or war metal, maybe?
Porno grind.
That's sort of the interesting thing is these genres that are influenced by punk and hardcore punk, like grindcore, like war metal. And punk's a political thing. You're like trying to push the boundaries of music and of aesthetics. It's not supposed to taste good.
That is true.
The more you're trying to piss off the people that you want to listen to it, I feel like the more you're getting to Everclear. The more it's less about what you're sounding like and more about what you're saying. There's plenty of times that bands will abandon the traditional song method in exchange for a very clear, very passionate message.
Specifically, my favorite grindcore band of all time is Pig Destroyer.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have a bassist, is something that kind of turns people off. It also represents a rejection of what rock and what metal should be and a focus on what metal's really building towards.
I was going to say, you get to a certain level of intensity where it's simply about expressing the emotion. Nothing more. It's just, I want to express how pissed off I am. And to be honest, if you're pissed off, your brain can turn into this gray matter. It can turn into this fucking radio static of, illegibility. And that is perfectly portrayed through these harder, more intense metals where it's like, it's not supposed to sound good because it's supposed to portray just how fucking mad I am.
This is something we've hit a couple times on the podcast is one of the appeals of music is the de-individuating effects. It's like a little ego death when you're blasted by a wall of sounds, pulsing to a rhythm that just forces your body. Often in music, that manifests as dance. If there's a steady rhythm that you start to predict, then your body will step in to reinforce those predictions, especially when it's slightly syncopated. Like swing music is really danceable because it's not quite on beat. So you can join in making that beat. But metal, the beat is, again, extreme tempos. Often it's really unpredictable. You can't dance to it in a traditional sense. And all that's left is to become part of the same chaotic wall of sound by throwing yourself into other bodies.
Yeah, the music almost takes on like a visceral effect, and the sound, like pressure levels, like have like a physiological effect on the body.
Yeah, it's confusing. It's disorienting. I don't know if either of y'all listen to Liturgy at all.
I have before.
And their music's fun, but their frontwoman's also has written papers on extreme metal. And one of her notions is the haptic void, how she describes this sensation of rage, disorientation, the physiological effects of like muscular tension, clenching, stank face, all that.
Hell yeah.
And that's sort of the trajectory of extreme metal. And different subgenres of extreme metal, death metal, doom metal, black metal, they all represent different ideas of what's the ultimate form of the haptic void and what possible routes can we take to get there.
I mean, not to tangent this into another area, that's when I finally learned to appreciate jazz, is viewing it from a similar level. Like when you say like the muscular tension, the stank face, like watching live some jazz players like rip apart their instruments going crazy, like that's hit me as hard as like a deep like doom metal like has done me. And it's just like, yeah, weird ways that like you can get the same thing and it's stupid.
Yeah, it's different ways of translating the same ideas.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the evolution of jazz has followed a very similar pattern to the evolution of metal, where they pursued more of an emotion versus a structure.
Mm-hmm. That's sort of free jazz. And I wonder if something could be said about the prevalence of jazz fusion as well. Sort of like metal fusion. It's just a universal intensifier. It represents one extreme of self-expression that you can use to modulate any other kind of music. You can have melodic rock mixed with metal, sort of metalcore, and it's like hugely popular because everyone can get behind arena rock.
Oh yeah.
Right.
It's what it's designed for. And then jazz fusion. Every genre imaginable can borrow elements from jazz to just make it more more interesting, to make it a throwback to a certain era, or just to keep you on your toes as far as harmonic and rhythmic structure?
There's a lot of extreme metal bands that actually have quite a bit of jazz influence, and a lot more progressive extreme metal bands, if we can even call that another genre, do a lot of different jazz parts and shit.
That's what's kind of fun for me is, and this is definitely like not why they do it, but another like thing that adds is why I love when extreme metal bands add, there's a song, Grey Matter Mechanics, where its outro is just this really nice Spanish guitar outro, and the entire rest of the song is nothing like that. They're unrelated. But I feel it's low-key like legitimizing to people who don't like the genre, like we still know what we're doing. We're not just out here going baga 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 baga. Like there's a lot of thought behind what we're doing, and here's a little thing for you that can let you know.
All this chaos is intentional.
Yeah.
That's definitely not why they're doing it, because as artists you don't care what people who aren't about your art think. But it's just a nice little.
I was going to say Knocked Loose, in a quite literal example, has a jazz outro. I mean, it's a song called Counting Worms that is pretty fucking intense and pretty, I would say, close to the hardcore spectrum. And it outros with a smooth jazz outro. I mean, it just quite goes hand in hand.
Their drummer is pretty cracked.
I mean, we can rattle off these bands that do this metal, jazz, rapid back and forth. Candiria is the first one that comes to mind. Mr. Bungle has its moments as well.
Hell yeah.
I almost put on a Mr. Bungle shirt because I couldn't find my Autovon shirt, but I just settled for the hoodie.
So where do we think the future of metal, specifically the subgenre of chasing that next level of intensity, is going to go?
100 gex.
Honestly,
I won't elaborate.
beyond the bands that are getting metal radio play, there's a lot of really interesting things happening in the trap metal and hyperpop scenes.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, people who listen to metal and are learning to incorporate these ideas but aren't bound by the rock band format. It's like industrial metal in that it's really just exploiting sound for sound, not bound to what metal should be. But they also know that, yes, blast beats exist, and we can use these.
Yes, I think there's a beautiful thing going on where the very heavily intense metal is adopting rap structure, I would say, to an extent. And it, not in a new metal sense, but even it's in a new evolution.
It just feels like punk in a good way. Like,
yeah, the one that comes to mind to me is, of course I'm blanking on the name right now. Excuse me, sorry.
I was trying to remember the name of the dude you showed me.
They wrote the song "The Orphan."
Paleface.
Paleface, thank you. Yes, Paleface is trailblazing that.
He started out as a hip hop artist, right?
Absolutely, he did. Yes.
There's a lot of compatibility, especially as far as the importance of vocal flow. I've said this exact same thing before. Metal and hip hop are both allegedly unpitched, but it's actually complex pitch.
Yeah.
You're not restricted by a scale, so it's a lot more about the nuances of expression, the contour of the ups and downs, how loud, how intense, combined with the rhythm. And sort of how metal started out was taking a cue from early punk, where it was these traditional melodic ideas, but done intentionally badly. You're just like shouting melodies. But what hip hop really introduced, and how I think it's revolutionizing metal right now, is that there's different ways to think about melody that can work with screamed vocals, that can work with shouted vocals, and that are like still catchy, still melodic, but not in a traditional European art music sense of melodic.
I've always said from day one that hip hop and screaming extreme metal vocals always have had something in common, where hip hop vocals, when you listen to them, it's like, sure, there might be some melody in some songs, but it's more of a percussive type of instrument. Like you're hooked on the beat or the sound of it, the hooks that they're saying. And extreme metal vocals is kind of exactly the same way. You're hooked on the sound, whatever sound they're making. You're hooked on the way that they're doing it, the way that it's blending with the rest of the instruments.
Yeah, it's a true synthesis of melody, rhythm, and language, just the texture of words.
Yeah.
I know we've covered that a time or two, because that's one of my favorite concepts is the percussive, like pa ta ka and ah ba da, like pa da, ah pa. Like you can manipulate words so well, and when it comes to screams, there are so many different ways to scream words. Which I mean, this is weird that it like crosses over to that, but do any of y'all know Scarlord?
Yeah, dude,
absolutely.
I love Scarlord.
Yeah, so he has I found him through this interview. I want to say, I forget where it was, but they went to a studio, which was just a house in the middle of nowhere. Like, I mean, open plains. And he was explaining to them, like, the hardest part about coming up with a flow is not like the flow, it's like which scream I'm going to use, because you can do a ah, or you can do a ah. You can say fuck you, or you can say fuck you, or you can say fuck you. Like, there's so many different variations you can do with your tone of scream, and he was just really invested in that idea. And that's why I got a lot of respect for Scarlord up front.
Dude, as an extreme vocalist, can confirm that's the hardest part about writing vocals is figuring out what type of scream you want to do.
You definitely know a little bit about that. Yeah. Actually, everyone in this room except me definitely knows a little bit about that. Well, everybody in this call, this audio.
All the above.